All right, everybody, it's time to get started. Welcome to LPC today. Welcome to everyone in the room. Welcome to everyone online. If you haven't signed in already, please use this QR code. You're seeing that to sign in. What's the last thing you said? Just minutes.
Minutes, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say something about the session. We're getting to the halfway mark of the session, which is great. But we're going to start to see a ramp up in requests from the league for your participation and help. Up until now, we've been hearing a lot about bills. League staff and your officers and your board have been hearing a lot of feedback, listening as well. But now we're getting to the time where we're going to start having to ask you for action. Today, there will be action items in our meeting. There will be requests for homework. Please fill those as soon as possible. Please respond in a timely manner. This helps us better advocate for all our cities. While I mentioned that we're at the halfway mark for the session, we're nowhere near the halfway mark in the amount of work that's going to be completed the rest of the session. We'll be looking more and more to LPC members to be the arms of the League Army. When you receive an action alert, it's serious, it's time sensitive. Please figure out who your legislator is and reach out to them by call or text right away, as soon as you can. When we ask for feedback and homework info, please get that back to us as soon as possible. The strength of the Army is the League Army. The strength of the League is the League Army, and you'll see us start to need that more and more. So with that, I will look for a motion to approve last week's minutes from LPC meeting. So Councilman Ivey and Councilman Dugan, a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And I'm turning the time to
Cam, you're up first.
Cam. No.
Don't you have overview
Oh.
stuff? We're gonna jump those. We talked about it. We talked about this really quickly. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Lee, Deputy Director here at the League, for anyone who doesn't know me. A couple of bills. So I'm flagging these now because we're going to talk about them, but I'm flagging them now because they're not just homework, they are in classroom work. We're going to want you to be texting while we're sitting here about these. So one, good bills, HB 492 from Rep. Roberts, State Housing and Infrastructure Partnership. We'll talk about these more in depth. HB 425, Karen Peterson, the Transportation Utility Fee Bill. If it feels like we've been talking about that for 3 years, it's because we've been talking about it for 3 years, and we're going to try to get over the finish line this year. We have some bad bills that we're concerned about. HB 184, this is up in committee this afternoon. We've made some assignments already on this one. If you have legislators in this committee, we'll be asking you to be texting them, reaching out to them today. SB 211 from Senator Colomore, tort reform, problematic bill we've talked about the last couple of weeks. That's one we're also going to ask you to reach out on today. And then HB 501 from Representative Bolander on water fees is a bill that we've heard a lot of concern from you about. And so we're going to talk about that one. But be ready today. Again, this is not just go home and do this, but while you're sitting here, you've got your phone. We won't judge you for looking at your phone if you're texting legislators. Otherwise, we might. Other homework, property tax process. We're going to need some information back to you on this one. We're going to talk about all these more in depth. So if you're like, I don't know what the homework is yet, you're right. We're going to tell you. I'm just getting these on your radar. Then what's missing on HB 492, transportation infrastructure and housing amendments. And finally, this is a homework you can start right now if you don't know this, because we're going to ask you, what % of your general fund reserve balance is in PTIF? If you don't know that and you want to text someone back home to ask them, this would be a time to do that because we are going to ask that question in a minute. But instead of going to homelessness last, we're going to turn the time to Molly to talk about homelessness first. Oh, do you need to clarify?
So sorry, for that last item, it's not just the amount in the PTIF. Many of your communities keep that amount in the PTIF, but it's basically just the amount you have in reserves versus your general fund. So that's the
clarification. So percent of reserve balance, whether it's in PTIF or not. So if you don't know that one, text back home because we're going to slide you on that. And now, Molly.
Going first at LPC, a dream. Hi, I'm Molly Wheeler. I'm one of the deputy directors at the League along with Justin. And the main thing in my policy portfolio is homelessness and a bit of public safety for the League. We're going to talk about 2 bills that are out briefly, but I want to spend most of our time going over a concept of a bill that has yet to be numbered. This is not going to be, as you can see, we have a stacked agenda. I want to make sure that by the end of my time with you, everyone has a baseline understanding of the Shelter Cities Mitigation Fund, how it works, and some proposed changes to that fund. We're not going to have a ton of time for discussion of whether those changes are good or bad. And candidly, at this moment, we don't have enough details, I think, for anyone to make a super informed decision about that. But I want to make sure that we all at least understand. Later this week, I will schedule a meeting if folks are interested where we can dig into this more if you have more questions. We still don't have a bill on this, so it is still very conceptual. We have a lot of newly elected officials, and so I just want to run through the role of cities when it comes to homelessness. Homelessness is really complex. It is multifactorial. It's driven by individuals. It's driven by systems, and there is no silver bullet to address it. Cities and towns have a role in addressing homelessness, but they are not the singular solution to homelessness. Specifically, when we're talking about municipalities' role in homelessness, we're largely talking about public safety policy, and we're talking about land use decisions. When you're talking about other things like social services, health and human services, other components of the system, that's when you get into talking about counties, the state, service providers, the private sector, philanthropic community, you name it. So when we talk in this room about cities' role, we're having a land use conversation, we're having a public safety conversation. The big question that we've been navigating for the last year, the transformative central campus. And the question is, to campus or not campus? There's been a lot of discussion and drive from key leaders at the state to create a transformative central campus in the west side of Salt Lake City. That concept is still held dearly by a lot of state leaders. There are also a lot of state leaders who do not hold that concept so dearly. The intention for it this year was to get a large appropriation from the state, about $20 million, to be matched by a large federal appropriation, and then local dollars, which never became clear as to what local dollars were. The federal dollars did not come to pass. There is not going to be sufficient money for the state to create a campus this year, and there has been broader conversation as to if a campus comes online in general, what it looks like if it does. And the state, especially this year, and it appears moving forward, is looking more at high utilizers, which are people who touch the system in a variety of ways, whether that is through a crisis shelter, through your police interactions, through a mental health or behavioral health receiving center, kind of you name it. The folks who are kind of dubbed quote unquote frequent flyers in communities is where the policy shift is pivoting more so. I flagged this all for you to say that we're having this conversation amid this kind of unshaky setting, as well as property tax and everything else we're talking about. We're having a pretty serious conversation with big ramifications in a pretty unclear landscape still. As that becomes more clear, we'll be sure to share that with you. So there's two bills I want to talk about first, and they are dealing with campus legislation. So should a campus come to pass, these are the policies that we will have. The first one is 239 by Senator Escamilla, who represents this area. It is really requiring comprehensive safety plans for OHS to be created. Additionally, it has additional oversight and investigations and creates a more expanded role for the Homeless Services Ombudsman and gives them enforcement tools with the campus. And again, this is language that if a campus comes to exist, we are recommending supporting this. It creates more regulations and ensures that if anything were to transpire in this space, that it could be a well-regulated operation. The second deals with representation on the Utah Homeless Services Board. We advocated as a league really strongly that we needed to have municipal voices on that board, and right now we do. We have Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall serving on the Utah Homeless Services Board, as well as South Salt Lake Mayor Cherie Wood. This bill would say that if a campus comes to be, that someone from the surrounding community would also serve on this board, which again, we support. We think that having local control and local voices is good, so we would recommend that the body support that. So that's kind of where we are with the landscape and with existing bills. The mitigation fund. The mitigation fund was created in 2018 after Operation Rio Grande. When that happened and the state moved from the centralized kind of model in downtown Salt Lake City to the scattered campus model across the Salt Lake Valley, they created the mitigation fund. And it also came with a recognition that homelessness is a statewide issue and that every municipality plays a role in addressing homelessness. And every city plays a role in one of two ways. Either one, you host a qualifying shelter, or two, you contribute to the Shelter Cities Mitigation Fund to help those cities that host a shelter offset the expenses they incur for hosting one. Right now, we have 11 shelter cities. They represent about 24% of the state's population, but host 80% of the beds. And of the majority of the remaining 20% beds, those are typically domestic violence shelters that do not have a big public safety impact on a community, quite like the low barrier homeless shelters do. Like I said, if you aren't receiving funding, you're paying into the fund. The mitigation fund is meant to reimburse cities, and I put an emphasis on reimburse. They have to actually incur the cost for their shelter-related expenses for hosting that in their community. It's predominantly public safety. Like we said, it's a land use and public safety conversation. In fiscal year 25, there was about $17.5 million in the fund that went to the shelter cities. 7.5 of that, the league has worked really hard to get ongoing state appropriations dollars in there. It started at 0 over the last few years, and we've worked hard to get that up to 7.5. Right now, local contributions account for about $10 million as well. Despite this, when we chat with shelter cities and look at their expenses, they are still collectively subsidizing the public safety expenses of having a shelter in their community to the tune of about $30 million. Additionally, more shelters are coming online, which dilutes those funds even further. So, for example, Sandy opened up a shelter for the medically vulnerable. South Salt Lake just opened up a new shelter for families. Tooele came online with a shelter for that region. St. George has opened up a family shelter. So as more shelters come online, there's dollars that need to extend further and further, and cities and their residents are subsidizing that land use more and more. So how does your contribution to the mitigation fund work? Right now, every municipality that pays into the fund pays either 2.5% or $275,000 into the mitigation fund. That comes off of the population distribution of your local option sales tax, which you can see here. What this bill that has yet to be numbered, we have not seen yet, is proposing, and so sorry, you can see as well. So it's your mitigation, or your population distribution multiplied by the rate is what creates the mitigation fund. The bill sponsor would like to create more stability in the fund so that essentially we identify how many beds are in the system, we decide we're going to fund those beds at a set cost, and that then will be multiplied by the city's contribution, the remaining city's population share, which would give you a contribution rate. It's a little bit more similar to a property tax than the sales tax. So we're saying we're having a revenue or impact-driven fund total. You pay into it based on the size of your population, and then that gives you your rate. One thing we would make sure we want to negotiate is that we put some rate cap in statute still. We don't want the system to grow so expansively that suddenly, there's no ceiling on what the future could hold. There's also been, we've heard from you over time, a desire to recognize what cities are doing that help the system that aren't necessarily a qualifying shelter bed. So over the interim, I was able to have conversations with over 30 of our members from shelter cities, non-shelter cities, elected officials, staff, Wasatch Front, rural Utah about the fund. And one thing we often heard was, we want to be a part of the solution. We aren't going to have a massive shelter in our community. It doesn't make sense for us, but we would like to do something to help. One thing that is being considered with this bill is saying, essentially, if you are doing something that helps in a way that is site-based and federally recognized, you could receive an offset. So that would be a small shelter that isn't quite big enough to qualify. HUD recognized and site-based transitional housing, which is usually used for about 6 to 24 months for people to try to help them get them on their feet and get them into permanent housing, or permanent supportive housing, which is permanent housing almost exclusively for folks who have experienced chronic homelessness or have a disability. So essentially, the principle behind this is if your community is a part of the solution, you will pay fewer dollars into the fund. However, like I said, the bill sponsor wants to make sure that we are having a stable fund amount. So what this would require is that those offsets that municipalities are earning are then redistributed to the remaining cities to make sure there's sufficient dollars in the fund, which again is leaning into this principle. Every community participates in homelessness, whether that is through your land use decisions and or your contributions to mitigate public safety impacts. So this is our example. Right now, we have Molly City, Carson City, Cassidy City, Jared City, and the city of Alexa. They are mighty fine cities. You'll notice Cameron City did not make the cut. So we'll say, right, that this is the fund balance. This is how many dollars need to go into it. You can see that Molly City and Carson City are the biggest cities by population. So our cities are paying more into the fund. That's how it kind of works now. What this imagines, though, is we're going to say that I actually have a pretty small homeless shelter in my community, and I also have 50 permanent supportive housing beds. And Carson actually has 100 transitional housing beds in his community. So my contribution gets reduced because I am doing things that are a part of the solution, and Carson gets some credit because he's also doing something. However, Cassidy City, Jared City, and the city of Alexa are not making those land use decisions. And so they would then pay a little bit more into the fund. They would receive and pay for the piece of the offset that Carson City and Molly City earned. So that comparison, you can see Molly City shrinks, Carson City shrinks, and the other cities would grow proportionally. One thing I want to make sure I flag in here, when we talk about the fund potentially growing, I also want to flag that if this happens, the fund could potentially shrink, and that the number of beds, when we're determining that, would also be deemed calculated based on their occupancy rate. So if I have a shelter with 100 beds that is only half full, that does not count as 100 beds, that would count as 50 beds. And so if beds are not full, that would shrink the amount of dollars going into the fund, and it would also shrink the amount of dollars that a city received. Are you with me so far? Okay, thanks. I know this is not the easiest. So then what happens with the shelter cities? They're receiving these dollars. So again, shelter cities would continue to be reimbursed for the demonstrable shelter-related expenses they have. They would be subject to more financial reporting and review by the Office of Homeless Services, the Homeless Services Board, and the Shelter Cities Board to make sure that, again, it's state dollars, it's local dollars going in, and we want to make sure that we are all understanding how those dollars are being spent across communities. It would also slightly alter the allocation of those dollars, which would still be driven by a formula. The bill sponsor would like that formula created in rule, which would consider the bed number or room number, because we've had non-congregate shelters come online in Sandy and South Salt Lake, as well as St. George, potentially. Occupancy rates, again, wanting to know how full those shelters are, and the population size to help us understand potentially how much of an impact a shelter is having. A big shelter in a big city has a different impact than a big shelter in a smaller community. So that is the premise. We do not have a bill yet. We are working to better understand what it may be. It is still very much up in the air. We are figuring it out. Could I get a quick raise of hands if folks would be interested in a follow-up conversation later this week? Or would you like to wait for the bill to come out and we could discuss it then? So conversation this week? Couple? Okay. Sounds good. I'll do a call this week. If folks want to join, you're welcome to. If you don't want to, absolutely no pressure. Are there any quick questions, like overall big picture questions about this? I don't want to gloss over it too quickly, but I also want to recognize we're tight on time. All right. Thank you all so much. And also, sorry, huge shout out to Cassidy. She made those slides comprehensible, as always. Thank you.
Okay, in all my excitement to rally the League Army, I forgot to mention that we have some guests with us here today. So I have Mr. Chandler here. Yes. Could you come up and introduce so we can recognize our guests? Thanks.
All right. Josh Chandler, West Jordan City Attorney. This is my first time at the podium, but this is a little intimidating. Been in the room many, many times. I've had the pleasure of getting to know some officials from a city called Nova Vorontsovka, which is a small community in Ukraine that is very close to the front lines of the war. I've invited them to come and attend LPC today so that they'd have the opportunity to see how cities can collaborate and how much we can accomplish when we work together, and see what wonderful work the League of Cities and Towns does to facilitate that. I have with me Andrei Siletsky, if you want to stand, who is the mayor of Nova Vorontsovka. I also have Karina Dobrovolska, who is responsible for special projects and international relations for the city, and Serhiy Pilipenko, who's the director of public utilities. We also have with us Yuli Morozov, who is a consultant and advisor to the mayor in the city there. So we've had a wonderful morning already. Cam was kind enough to help introduce the delegation to Attorney General Brown and to House Speaker Schultz this morning. We'll have the delegation also recognized this afternoon on the floor of the House and the Senate. So we have a very busy agenda. But thank you for all being wonderful cities and examples of what local government can do to better the lives of their residents. It's really what they're looking to accomplish, and I hope we can present some good examples of that to them while they're here in Utah. If any of you would like to learn more about their time here, they're going to be here for the week, please feel free to reach out to me. Or if you have any questions about sister city relationships with Ukraine, I know Sandy has recent success with that. Salt Lake City also has a sister city in Ukraine. There may be others that I'm not aware of, but I'd be happy to talk to your communities and help facilitate that if you'd be interested at all. So, and the mayor has The mayor has a gift that he'd like to present to the League of Cities and Towns. The League has been very helpful in facilitating their visit and sending a letter in order to help facilitate the visa process, which, as you can imagine, is a little bit complicated right now. But the League played a key role in making that happen. So thank you very much. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's like box from Novoransovka. It's our symbol of economy and of the brave. It's our monument and famous agriculture.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I think on behalf of all of our cities, we're grateful to have you with us. We're frankly humbled to have you with us. The challenges that we are facing as cities, frankly, seem small in comparison to those that you are facing with your country, and certainly trying to keep things like public works and public safety happening while you're dealing with so many other issues on the international stage. And so we're grateful that you would be willing to spend time with us. We are happy to open up our hearts and our expertise from our teams to you. I'm excited that you'll be visiting my city on Wednesday to tour our public works, and I'm excited that I could join you for lunch. But you know, on behalf of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, thank you and welcome. And we will be happy to display this memento of our friendship and of your interest in what's happening here in Utah. And hopefully we can reciprocate that back and be of assistance to you as well. And frankly, none of us have ever served with the challenges that they face. And so, you know, I know we've just given them a round of applause, but frankly, I think we should all be upstanding on our feet for the challenges that they face while serving that we have never endured. Turn it back over to you, Cameron.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, President Bradshaw. And again, thank you for being here and welcome All right, let's jump back into it. Now I have to figure out how to ask Carson to come figure it out. Okay. A lot of moving pieces. It's week 4, folks. What that means is that Wednesday morning is the official halfway point of the session's calendar. Notice I didn't say the session itself because we're probably 10% of the way there on the workload. For those of you who are new, let me just make sure you understand the flow of the session and why it changes this week. Up until this point, half of their time has been focused on the budget. Half of their time has been focused on bills. From a league perspective, we only engage in appropriations at a general level. For example, local administrative advisor, or a couple of bills we'll talk about today, okay? Starting Wednesday of this week, that changes. They'll have prioritized the appropriations requests, and then come Thursday, that's going to be all policy all the time. Keep in mind that they are 15% ahead of schedule compared to last year, and last year was a record number of bills. So as of now, there are a ton of bills sitting in the Rules Committee waiting to come out, waiting to get prioritized, waiting for hearings. There are a lot of bills we're going to talk about now that are still behind the scenes and still in Rules Committee. Action alerts are going to come fast and furious. You'll notice we really haven't done any action alerts on bills outside of the Armenta fix because half the time it's been appropriations, half the time it's been bills. That changes this week. It's also still early enough in the session that bills won't die procedurally. So there are several bills in committee today that we have as position pending that we're hard at work on that we're going to present today. And we've told the sponsors, like, we need to present these bills to our folks. These are big bills, and we need a couple of days to get feedback from our members. But notice I didn't say a couple of weeks. It's a couple of days because things are going to be moving fast here in week 4. Week 4 and week 5 are probably the heaviest lifting policy days during the session because there's still enough time to get the policy right before you start looking at the clock. Okay? Any questions? That's particularly for the newbies who are here for the first time, the newly elected mayors and council members. Any questions on that? Okay, let's go. All right, SB 97, we've talked about this one ad nauseum. We're expecting another substitute. We've been position pending the whole time. Our recommendation, just because we're getting asked this question upstairs, is oppose the first sub, but still stay position pending on the pieces that we're working on. Senator McKay, Mayor Palmer, and I met for 45 minutes on Thursday, Mayor, as we were walking through what he was thinking on a potential substitute. So we want to stay position pending on that process, but recognize the bill as is, if it came up for a vote, is problematic. Okay, so that's the nuance here. The bill as is problematic, and Mayor, I think it's fair to say the senator acknowledges to us his first words out of his mouth. Like, I'm not surprised you have concerns. Here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And then we're going back and forth from there. Okay. So last week we asked you some Slido questions and we relayed the feedback from your Slido questions. Mayor Palmer and I relayed that to Senator McKay last week. Here is question number 1 of Slido today. Uh-oh.
This question is only for cities. Right now, the city cap, and that excludes towns, the city cap is 35%. Towns are 100%. So if you're a town and you're wondering why that only goes up to 35%, that's why.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So if you're a town, you need not fill out. Actually, if you're a town, you can still say, I'm not sure. That's actually probably the best place to respond if you're a town population of 1,000 or less. But for cities, this is what we talked about last week, the 35%. What we've been trying to figure out is just where are cities right now with your general fund. Some cities actually have policy in place that they don't go above a certain percentage, even if state law allows 35%. So we're just trying to gather that information because we've had legislators who've asked us about it. Again, we're just fine if you say, I'm not sure. That's okay, because we'll follow up with you as well as try to gather this data set. So I will leave this open momentarily. Good, we're at 109. I'll leave this open for another 15 seconds or so. Okay, 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm moving. Next, Part of the discussion with SB 97 and other bills up here has been around the definition of new growth. And new growth is admittedly complicated, but it's also really important. There are two pieces we're surveying for you today, so please don't fill these out until I explain to you what these two concepts are that are under consideration right now. Concept number one is changing the definition of new growth so that it only includes new building area, okay? So in other words, let me give the illustration. If you have a house right now, and you are remodeling the house, the remodel of the house may increase the assessed value of the property, but the alterations don't increase the size of the house, okay? Whereas if you have a detached ADU that gets built in the backyard, that is now increasing the building area. So therefore, that would count as new growth. First example would not count as new growth. The second example would. Now, what does this mean, say, in a commercial setting? If you're expanding an office building or you're expanding a commercial building, the new building area is what would trigger the new growth. This has been part of the discussion around better calculations from the assessor side as well, and trying to get to a definition of new growth that everybody can understand what it means. So there's more certainty for property owners in the tax collection side. Okay. So that's the quick and dirty explanation here, recognizing I'm trying to simplify just to get that first blush thought of like, yeah, okay, I see what they're trying to do here versus, oh, this goes a bridge too far for us. We're just trying to get that first blush thought. And uncertain is okay. That's why we kept uncertain in this question. Sometimes we try to force an answer. Uncertain's okay here. Okay, so I'll leave this one open.
Kim, for clarity, Mark Christensen,
Yep.
Saratoga Springs. So you're only talking about a remodel or an addition on this question? Or are we talking about a new home being built?
The new home is the second question.
Okay,
We
just want to make sure.
separated them to try to.
So this is
nuance the
remodel
questions.
or addition. Got it.
Yep. And I'm going to add another piece that you didn't say, but I think you're kind of getting at. If you remodel your basement and the family's still just living there, that's one thing. You remodel the basement to turn it into an internal ADU, that's a different ballgame. Admittedly, like that is an unanswered question in this concept. So we have brought that up, but again, they're trying to figure out, is there a better definition to new growth here? Mayor Alder, let's wait for Mike. Well, what is, yeah. So, yeah, we just give her the mic. Yeah. Go ahead, Mayor Alder. Okay, I'll just repeat it for you if that's right. So Providence Mayor Alder asked, what does it look like now? And the answer is it's a little more complicated. And one of the frustrations that we've heard from cities in the property tax space in general is that it's hard for a city to predict what that new growth is going to look like. So as we look at the calendar around property tax, which is really the impetus of Representative Peterson's bill, one of the tripwires has been when Taylorsville or Providence or Washington or whoever gets the new growth numbers. So part of the discussion has been, can we simplify the definition of new growth to maybe get that number out sooner, which in turn would help Providence or Washington or Taylorsville make a decision on, do we need to increase taxes or not? So I'm not answering the exact question of what new growth looks like, but it's just more complicated and less predictable. Okay. Next question, and this gets to the piece that Mark Christensen from Saratoga brought up a second ago. This is the second piece of the conversation. So let me explain this before you respond as well. There have been examples that both the counties and some legislators have highlighted, and this where the county assessor has calculated new growth over 2-year period of time, which makes sense, right? Because things take a while to build at times. So you may get 25% of new growth increase in year 1, but then there've been examples where then in year 2, all of that new growth is calculated 100%. So now 25 plus 100 equals 125%. So it's been more new growth than what should have been calculated. So one of the questions is, can we clarify this to say that instead of getting 25% and 75%, which is what should happen, and trying to avoid the 25 plus 100, which has happened, to simply say, you get new growth once the physical improvements are completed. So that may mean in a project that spans 2 years, you would get 0 in year 1, even though it's 25% complete. You'd get 100% in year 2 when it is complete. So again, the pro to this, more predictability from the assessment perspective and maybe with the revenue side. The con to this is if you have a large redevelopment project or you have a large subdivision that's, being phased in at times, the revenue is going to lag behind when you're already providing services. Pros and cons, which is why we're looking for the first blush thoughts on the concept. Okay, any follow-up questions on this one? Cassidy, any questions online? Well, as Mike's make a few comments. Anything I need to address, or can we address them there? Think about it. Let's go Gary first.
Thanks, Gary Hill, Bountiful City. Cam, how does this dovetail with the prior portion where, for example, you might build a home, not finish the basement for 2 years, basement gets finished, it's no longer considered new growth and not part of the calculation.
Yep.
And the same would go for unfinished office space.
Yep. This is why you're combining what Mark was just asking. Like, I'm going to put these in the unanswered question category. You're asking the right questions. And these are the questions that when Mayor Palmer and I met with Senator McKay on Thursday, we were walking through these concepts, said, okay, like, see where you're coming from. There are a lot of unanswered questions here. Let's just take a first blush from the group and see, are these questions we need to try to answer or not? So I appreciate you asking. Okay, Cassidy, how many people online, by the way?
That's right.
So we have 274 online and maybe 2 empty seats in here. So that's awesome. So thank you, everybody. What?
Cameron.
Oh, 400. That's awesome. So thanks, everybody, for your participation.
Cameron.
Do you have a question, Cassidy, online or? Okay, so similar. Got it.
Cameron.
Yeah. So I think that's the unanswered question of what does that mean? Did I hear my name?
Yeah, back here.
Seth?
Seth with Spanish Fork City. Is there a way to maybe refocus the senator's efforts, not on changing how we calculate this, but on how we do the math?
Yeah.
Like this issue, I think all of the concerns that you'll hear from us include things that get started, they don't finish for a while, and yet we still have to provide services there in some form, if at least increased police protection because it's an unfinished structure and we have people that are doing bad things inside or whatever. So I don't love this, but what if we focus on you only get 100%. You don't get 125% of growth. So refocus it to the calculation side, not on, so it doesn't affect us, but the counties do it differently.
Right. So focus on the calculation rather than the timing. Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Okay. I'm going to move on from Slido because there are more property tax bills that have come out. House Bill 485 also is a new growth bill. This one's in the House, Representative Auxier. And this bill, again, is trying to have the lesser of an inflation adjustment to last year's budget or the eligible new growth. So if you're a fast-growing community under this proposal, let's say you're expecting new growth to be a 10% bump, you would get the lesser of whatever that inflation is or that 10%. If you're a community that's maybe not growing, then you're probably, your numbers may be even here. But our recommendation is to oppose the bill, recognizing there are lots of conversations going on about new growth, and your Slido feedback will be helpful. Now, let me quickly talk about fund balance. We asked a few questions last week. I mentioned this, but it's always better when people can see, like, what is it that's driving the discussion up here? So this is data that came from the state treasurer's office. So you can see in 2019, the amount of money that was in, this is PTIF, right? Carson, this data is from PTIF. So this is from PTIF, which is where most, but not all local governments will put their fund balances. So you can see how over the last few years, there's been significant growth in that PTIF, the state being the biggest one. And we've raised that in every setting, that the state is the biggest one. But nevertheless, this is part of their conversation of saying, there's all this taxpayer money sitting in reserves. Should we revisit the fund balance number? So just give you this as context, and that's why your data about what's happening in your individual city will be very helpful. Okay. House Bill 449, this is one we've been positioned pending to date. This is the required voter approval. We've asked you the Slido question previously, and the response was overwhelmingly concerned about voter approval. So our recommendation now, week 4, is let's just go ahead and say we're opposed based on those Slido results, knowing we've got the moving pieces. We talked through this bill in more detail last time. This is a new bill that came out last week, House Bill 484 from Representative Christopherson, and it kind of combines some of the Senator McKay concepts with the Representative Auxier concepts into one bill. And so again, recommending oppose because it's focused on, this is focusing on the voter approval piece. So it's a cap plus voter approval. And again, all of our Slido results thus far have shown overwhelming concern from you as the members on those. Okay, House Bill 161, you'll see I've crossed it out. We are expecting that this bill is not going to move forward anymore. We expect a different approach going forward here, but this was the bill that would have changed the residential exemption from the being taxed at 55% down to 40%. So as of now, we're expecting that bill will not move forward. Representative Cofford has since introduced House Bill 441, which gets to the required disclosure of the sale of a commercial property, which then in turn would help, Seth, coming to your point, on the math calculation piece, because then the county assessor will have more complete data. This has been tried multiple times in recent legislative sessions with with no success. It's never passed. It's hard to say if it'll pass this session or not because of all the focus, but nevertheless, she said, okay, if this other bill is not going to go anywhere, then let's have the conversation about this piece. So stay tuned. Our staff recommendation is to support because we think it'll help on the data collection and the math side. But again, lots of moving pieces in the property tax space. Okay, with that being said, this was the last time we surveyed you directly on what has become House Bill 236. So this was at LPC now 4 weeks ago, where we asked you before the bill came out, where you were at on the concepts of the operating budget and without the proposed property tax increase, okay? And then we also asked you about holding a truth and taxation hearing in June rather than August, and you can see those numbers from an earlier LPC. So based on these results, Representative Peterson has been amenable to amendments. In fact, she's already got a substitute out that makes some changes. I'm not going to walk through the details because I've done that at prior LPCs. This is the slide we shared with you last week where we're working on potential language to address these things. I can tell you now in my conversations with her, the legislature wants immediate effective dates for all of the property tax bill process bills. So if 236 were to pass, it would affect this year's budget process, okay? For items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, those are still out there and we've had language going back and forth. So over the next couple of days, we're going to be working on some red lines to try to address all that feedback. And I've actually went back through it over the weekend. I have about 30 pages worth of comments that you have sent us about this bill alone, okay? So we're trying to take those 30 pages of comments to work through what are the red lines necessary to make the bill workable. So that's what we're working on right now. Likewise, the question that several of you have asked are, where are the cleanups from last summer's situation where a bunch of communities did not get their certified rates or their taxing rates certified? Right now, they are in SB 238, which came out last week as well. Senator Wilson's bill identified these 5 things and said, I'm willing to work on these things. He said in committee and in our conversations with him that he's not interested in doing any sort of appeal process at the tax commission, but he is willing to make sure we get as much clarity as possible so that the rules are more user-friendly and easier to follow, okay? So that's a recap, and you'll see 2, 3, and 5 were actually the 2 and 3 in particular were the 2 biggest reasons why cities did not get their certified rates or their tax rates certified this summer, primarily 2 and 3. So he's willing to make some adjustments there, and we're working on wordsmithing those pieces. So right now you have in the process space, Representative Peterson's bill and Senator Wilson's bill, okay? All right, so now the 3 slides, I just walked through the 3 slides with Representative Peterson's bill and where she's willing to go on it. And thus far, she's been very responsive to our concerns about making sure it's workable. And with Senator Wilson, and he's been very responsive working through most of what we've requested on the clarifying language. So what we now need to know, we just want to check back in because the school districts have now voted to support Representative Peterson's bill. The counties have voted to support Representative Peterson's bill. Our recommendation is to stay position pending until we get it to a place that it's workable. But we want to just make sure that we're all singing off the same sheet of music here. So the question in front of you is if we're able to address those items that we just shared on the slides, if we're able to address those, how high of a priority would it be to oppose the bill? So in other words, if you feel like, yeah, we can get to it, if we get it to be workable, then that should mean it should be a low priority to oppose the bill. If you think there's no way to save this bill and we've just got to storm the castle, that would be high, and then medium somewhere in between. Okay, so I'll leave this Slido question open for a moment. Any questions? Whenever I see the phones behind me and right here in front of me, it's like I feel like everybody's filming me, but you're not. You're just taking a picture of the QR code. Oh, I know I'm being filmed somewhere else. Where is the camera in here? Well, yeah, right there and there. Okay. Any follow-up questions on this one? Okay. Numbers are coming in high, so we'll give it another 10 seconds. Okay. Before I give it to Justin for water, one of the homework assignments in the LPC email today is if you have suggestions for how to make those bills more workable, now is the time. I mentioned I've already got 30 pages of feedback, and that's great. That's what we want. But if, for example, in the form of government, that's your mayor council form, like a Salt Lake, a Murray, a West Jordan, a Logan, there's some really complicated nuances we're trying to work through there. So we welcome feedback of like, this is what this bill needs to say to be workable, because we're going to be working on that here in the next couple of days. Justin, take it away.
All right, quick quiz. Anyone have any guesses how many bills have passed so far this session? Always correct, too many. That have passed already? Passed already as we get to the halfway point. 40 is pretty close. 45 is what passed so far. So Cam's estimate that we're about 10% of the way done is actually maybe a little low, given where we've been the last few years. So a lot more bills to come. One bill that just came out this last week, HB 501, water modifications, sponsored by Bridger Bollinger. This is a bill that we were expecting. If you remember, there was a study that was done by Zions this last year around water fees. I know many of you saw that study. We talked about this at LPCs if you were there in the fall, particularly in November. But a couple of things, just some background about where the bill's coming from. They did the study and they've looked at some audits. There are a lot of water infrastructure needs that we will have in the next few decades. You can see a couple numbers here, $1.2 billion per year of expense in 2025 dollars related to water infrastructure projects, but then $102 billion worth of potential water infrastructure projects between new growth and changing out pipes, updating things, fixing things, all things you've got to do with water infrastructure. So there is a significant need in the next few years for water infrastructure. What this bill does is proposes a fee that would be collected to go in the State Water Infrastructure Fund. So here's a couple of the key pieces. Beginning January 1st, 2027, to qualify to receive state funds for either water development or public water systems, and this is either for public water, so culinary, secondary, or for wastewater. It deals with both of these. The system shall pay into the State Water Infrastructure Fund. So, say it one more time. If you want money from the State Water Infrastructure Fund, then you've got to pay into this fund to get it starting in January 1st, 2027. How much do you have to pay? There is a formula. The Water Development Coordinating Council will use this formula to figure out what you have to pay. So one, median adjusted gross income in that area, it may not just be in your city, it'll be in the service area, times 1.5% if it's only water or only wastewater. So if you only do one of those, you only do 1.5%, or 3% if you have both. Then you take that number and you multiply it by the number of connections. Even if you haven't done the math in your head, because you don't know what those numbers are, it's a fairly high number. that they would be collecting here. That money would not stay with your system. The money would be passed through to the state water infrastructure fund, but your local systems would be collecting that money. That's the bill that would go on. So that is January 1st next year. This goes into play for those who want money from the state water infrastructure fund. Beginning January 1st, 2031, every system pays into the fund, whether you're getting state water infrastructure funds or not. Questions, comments? We're going to deliberate on this one in a few seconds. So Mike, get ready to run the mic around here.
So didn't the governor talk about affordability for Utah citizens at his State of the State address? Just wanted to throw that out there as a question.
Yeah, no, and I know, Brian, you're being a little facetious with how you asked the question, but yes, both the Senate and the House have talked about how affordability and cost of living issues are their number one issues this year. So yes.
As it's drafted in 2031, is it 1.5 or 3%?
It's 1.5% if you do only water or if you do only wastewater.
And you
If you
mentioned
do
that-
both, it's 3%.
You mentioned
regardless.
though that we would be not being opting in, but
So
required after.
if you currently provide wastewater, but you don't do culinary water, it would be 1.5%. If you currently do culinary but not wastewater, 1.5%. If you do both, 3%. So the formula stays the whole way through. I see any other hands on this. All right, in the very back here.
So I want you to clarify for our group that this is in addition to the other water fee that we all heard about before the session started back in the fall. So would this be an additional?
This is a standalone fee, yes. So there was a fee that was coming out of the Division of Water Quality. This is a completely separate fee from that one. So it's another pass-through fee. Yes.
Okay, just wanted to say that out
Yes,
loud.
good
Thank
clarification.
you.
Yeah, this is not the same fee. This is an additional fee. Good clarification. We've got a Slido on this one. So let's go to that. How high of a priority is it for ULCT to oppose HB 501? High priority if you think we should be very focused on this one more than other issues. Medium priority if there are other issues of greater magnitude. Or low priority. You're okay with this?
Justin.
Heard
Seth-
from the back.
Yeah,
Seth, you're so
was-
quiet when you're saying our names.
Justin. Seth with Spanish Fork City. I'm sure I'm doing the math wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but my number is 29 million.
Yeah, that's a pretty big number for 1 year.
I don't know. I just did the math.
I think so. Yeah.
It could be. It could
Based
be
on
that
other
I,
people who have done the math, I don't think your math is wrong.
okay. I'm not trying to influence anybody, but this is a high priority.
Okay, 19 million here. Yeah. Now, here's the ask. So remember earlier we told you we have homework and then we have classwork. This is classwork. I want you to pull out your phones, and if you were concerned about this, let your representatives know that HB 501 is of concern to your city. Now, here's what I don't want you to say. I don't want you to say this is of concern to the league. Okay? It is. But I want you to say this is a concern to your city. And this could raise costs significantly for the water users in your city. So take out your phones, reach out now on this one. You can also reach out later, but there's no reason to wait. This bill has not moved very far yet, but if it is a concern to you, and I'm hearing that it might be, then I would suggest that you reach out to your representatives now and make sure this one's on their radar. I don't think it's been assigned. Yep, just your reps. Yeah, we're not making committee assignments yet. We're not doing an action alert yet, but sometimes a bill is a big enough deal. It's great to let them know right out of the gate that there are concerns with it. And who's taking transportation? Back to you, Cam.
All right, transportation. These two bills have come out in recent days. We're still recommending position pending because there's a lot of moving pieces. This we presented last week briefly because it had just come out. This would change the, oh yeah, well that's perfect. This would change the governance of the Utah Transit Authority from its current 3-member full-time Board of Trustees with a part-time local advisory, what's the council, right? Local advisory commission. This would then change that from the local advisory commission and the Board of Trustees to a 7-member part-time commission. So instead of having the 2 bodies like we have now with local advisory and the 3-member trustees, change it to a 7-member commission, okay? So what we recommended last time, a week ago, was 2 key principles around our engagement on it. Principle number 1 was about ensuring there was still robust local involvement in that UTA governance process. Number 2 was around if the state is going to be more involved in the governance, then having additional state resources to fund the transit system. So right now, there's been discussion around number 2 at the Capitol, so stay tuned on that. We've been prioritizing working on language for number 1, okay? Because again, the budget piece, there's awareness at the Capitol that they are considering putting more money into transit. So we've been working on number 1. And we've had a few different ideas that have been going back and forth. We've had a few mayors and council members involved in those conversations. So we just have a quick Slido question. We want to make sure that if this is a high priority for your city, we know who you are, so we can follow up with you. If it's not a high priority for your city, that's okay. But we just need to make sure we know if it's a high priority, then we can follow up with you as we're having these back and forths, because we're working on some amendments to take to Senator Harper and to leadership this week. Now, just to give you a sense of like how we use this data, I was going to mention this when we got to billboards, but while you're filling this out, last week we asked the question, for how many of you was it a high priority, medium priority, low priority to engage on the billboard legislation? Once we looked through that data, every city that said it was a high priority, we followed up with and said, here's the problem they're trying to solve. Here's some potential language. And then those cities all got back to us. And then once the cities got back to us and said, yeah, this actually could work, then we went and sat down with the other stakeholders. So when we ask high, medium, low, it's helpful in the aggregate, but it's also helpful so we can make sure to follow up directly with the communities for whom it's an important issue, okay? So I'll leave this open for 10 more seconds. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cassie, any questions on anything so far in the chat room? Okay. All right. Senator Harper's other transportation bill. This is not a Cassidy slide. I think that's pretty self-explanatory when you look at it. There's a lot in this bill, okay? My intent was first situational awareness, because this bill touches on a lot of different elements within the transportation space, okay? So the fact that so many people are like actively reading the slide, it makes me feel good. So thank you for that. Number 2, some of these impact cities, some of them don't. And there are a few other pieces that don't impact cities that I didn't put on the screen, but these all have at least some connection to cities. So for example, number 8, towing. There are a handful of you, Ogden, Provo, West Valley, you know who you are, who, whenever there are towing bills up here, have been extremely involved in those discussions. So I wanted to make sure you knew there's a towing provision in here. Now, how much we want to engage on it, that's what we need to hear back from you. So those of you who have big towing challenges in your community, take a look at that language on dispatch fees, let us know. Likewise, that piece number 1 around the transit funding, for those of you in Salt Lake and Utah counties, several years ago, the league worked in collaboration with WFRC, MAG, and other stakeholders, and frankly, Speaker Mike Schultz, to change the fifth from what it was before to what it is now. And what it is now is a quarter of those dollars from that 0.20 county imposed transportation tax flow directly to cities. That did not exist in the original bill. So we made that possible so that money flows directly to cities. Half of that money goes to transit in most places, but there are slightly different rules in Salt Lake and Utah counties. So this bill contemplates changing just the transit component in Salt Lake and Utah counties. Okay, so wanted to just make sure those of you in Salt Lake, Utah counties were aware of that piece here. There's also language in here around corridor preservation process and dollars for other transit and bus replacement in smaller counties. Because while UTA gets all the headlines, we have bus systems from St. George to Logan and several other places in between. Then in this section 3, this is the next step from last year's bill that was focused on Salt Lake City around highway reduction and traffic calming. This bill deletes the language from last year's bill and replaces it with this framework, where it requires all roads in Salt Lake City to be identified as Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, or Tier 4, and then identifies the rules of engagement for each of those 4 when it comes to traffic calming and highway reduction, and codifies the type of community outreach and UDOT coordination that is necessary, in some cases requiring UDOT approval. So right now, our recommendation is position pending because there's a lot in this bill and there are a lot of conversations happening. It's in committee this afternoon. So this is why I told you before, there'll be a lot of moving pieces here. We're recommending position pending, though we've been working on some potential amendments here and want to make sure folks were aware of it. Let me see if I missed anything. Well, one other thing is it also references that Salt Lake City could not have a travel or a traffic lane width less than 11 feet on certain tiers of those roads. So for those of you like Ogden or Provo, or like older cities that have, or cities that have urban centers, we're going to be following up with you to get a sense of what the standards are in your downtown areas, because that will be a helpful data point as part of this conversation. We have a Slido question here because we just threw a whole bunch of stuff up there, again, trying to figure out if your city saw something in there. The 3 points I referenced were towing, the Salt Lake City provisions, and the transit money in Salt Lake and Utah counties. But if there's anything else in there, you say, hey, this is high priority for my city, again, let us know, because there's going to be a lot of moving parts over the next few days. Castillo, you look like you had a question. Oh, you didn't? Oh, okay. All right. Any questions? Let's go. I'm not, okay. Yeah, Mill Creek. Yeah, Councilmember Desarnett.
Hey, Desirant from Mill Creek. I think we should all be really concerned about this. This is the camel's nose again. I don't really care, no offense to Salt Lake City, about Salt Lake City streets and roads. I do care about my streets and roads though. And as soon as the state starts to tell one city what they can or can't do, they're going to start telling the rest of us what we can or can't do.
Well, and I'll give an interesting fact pattern here that you didn't say, but I'll fill in the blank for you, since your city is bounded, or the boundaries of your city touch on Salt Lake City. You have several cities that may be a Tier 1, or excuse me, several roads in Salt Lake that may be Tier 1, Tier 2 that connect into Mill Creek. So it's a very fair question to say it's Tier 1, so this rule applies in Salt Lake. Will that rule ever apply in Mill Creek when it's the same road that connects through? Those are fair questions. The counter that Senator Harper would bring up if he were here would be that for some of these regional roads and these regional thoroughfares, particularly the ones that are owned by the state, there should be coordination happening anyway between the local government and the state before you're impacting those state roads as part of the state system. That's a key part of the conversation here. Councilmember Burrell, go ahead.
Okay, Ellen Burrell, Cottonwood Heights, and I share the concern that Mill Creek has for a medium-sized city. Our roadways, to maintain them, certainly to resurface or construct them, is extremely expensive. And mandating 11-foot wide lanes is not only a bad idea for expense to the city, it also sends a visual signal to drivers to drive faster. And that is the enemy of safety. And many cities, including Cottonwood Heights and probably Mill Creek and we have state routes that come right through our neighborhoods. So these kind of precedents are very alarming and very concerning.
Perfect. Thank you, council member. And the 11 feet wide that I was referencing, that, and I'm looking at Angela, make sure I'm getting it right. That would just be Tier 1, Tier 2. Am I remembering that correctly, or was it all 4 tiers? A thumbs up works if I'm right. Okay, it's unclear. Okay. It's unclear. Yeah, so it's unclear in the language now. The discussion has been around Tier 1. So, but your point still stands because Wasatch Boulevard is a major thoroughfare with houses on both sides. So let's go, Sam from West Valley.
Cam, what is the towing component that you know of? What is the point they're trying to get across with that?
Yeah, the language in there right now specifically deals with a towing for dispatch and would require approval from DPS and UDOT when setting that dispatch fee. So So what we're just trying to figure is how many cities actually do that sort of fee in the process that it's spelled out, because it's a narrower version of the fees statute. And then if it's a concern or not. Nathan?
It's actually in Salt Lake County, it's the BEC.
Yeah.
We spend 600, almost $700,000 a year managing tows for you being impacted by tows originating on HOAs. This is a fee to try and be reimbursed for that.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Nathan. So again, today we were just trying to do situational awareness because there's a lot in that bill. So hopefully we saved you the time of reading the whole thing. On the previous slide, I actually had a link that you couldn't tell was a link because there's so much on there. But thank you to WFRC for putting together a comprehensive fact sheet on it. That'll be in our LPC materials later. So thank you for putting that together. Okay. Any other questions on the transportation space? I'm going to skip this one until Jared gets here since he's in the other meeting. Yep. But any other questions on transportation? Okay, we'll come back to legal. This is another one that will have outreach component to it. But I am very excited about this one, folks. House Bill 184, when I built the slide deck yesterday, during a football game that was on in the background, we were talking about the first sub. There is a second sub that came out today, so we'll talk about that here in a second. But you've seen this before. We presented it several times now at LPC. Here's the second sub. The second sub is trying to limit the scope of the bill. And this always happens where you'll see a scenario where it's like, okay, we're opposed to the bill. And then the bill sponsor will say, well, what if I do this? What if I do this? What if you do this? And we have consistently maintained we're just opposed to this bill because of the principle around the state saying this is what the zoning is in code. And even if Harriman City or Lehigh City or South Salt Lake City or Riverton, even if you can come say no later, it's still the state dictating the zoning and code. So it's still a preemption style approach, even though in his outreach to us and to his cities, he said, I'm trying not to do a preemption because you can still say no, but it's still that preemption style approach. Okay. But you could see his second sub is trying to narrow it. And one of the big problems in the bill is that the bill is just unworkable and blurs the lines between legislative and administrative actions. You can see he's trying to address some of that in the second sub. So we're still opposed. And these are the reasons that we laid out last week about why we were opposed, and all of our survey work has showed opposition. The bill is in committee today at 3:40. Okay. So I mentioned a moment ago that the transportation bill was in committee this afternoon, and we were going to stay position pending because there are a lot of moving pieces on it. This is one where I think it just is where it is. This is where we are. And so we're going to take a moment and make assignments to follow up with legislators to express our opposition to the bill. Now, I'm going to come back to this because this goes into a little more detail. So feel free to take a picture of this slide. But again, to me, the simplest argument is just this would put zoning in state code, create that precedent that the state is now dictating that zoning, puts the burden on the city to say no to the state zoning, and then creates an unworkable process and blurs the line between what your council does as a legislative act versus what your city staff does in the administrative capacity. Okay. So let's make some assignments. Representative Hawkins, who either on the call or in the room is in Representative Hawkins's district? Scott and Tina, don't let me down here. Mayor Jensen. Did they just, what? So, okay, yep, Councilmember Carroll, perfect. Okay, so let's follow up with Representative Hawkins. Representative Cutler, where are my friends in Davis County? So I've got, that's great, Mayor Wilkinson and Bountiful, or Mayor Wilkinson of Centerville and Bountiful. And Representative Cutler is a former mayor, so I think he'll understand these points. Representative Fia, where are my friends in Southwest Valley? Awesome, a lot of hands, Southwest Valley, excellent. So let's make sure we follow up. I saw South Jordan, Riverton, Harriman. Yeah, South Jordan's already been in touch, so terrific. Representative Hanson. Okay, good. Good answers. I turned around to find my Saratoga Springs corner. Yeah, okay. Representative Jack. I have my Saratoga Springs corner. Now I have my Southwestern Utah corner, yeah. And then obviously online, we had, well, Washington was here earlier, but let's make sure. You already told him, okay. Representative Malga, this is West Valley, Taylorsville. Perfect. I've got West Valley here, Taylorsville. Perfect. West Valley and Taylorsville are neighbors in real life, and you're about as far away as you can be in the room, but both of you are on it, so thank you. Representative Miller, Salt Lake City. Perfect. Thank you, Salt Lake Row. Representative Owens, Mill Creek is normal. Oh, Mill Creek is partly here and partly there, so perfect. Representative Schallenberger, we're Orem friends. Perfect, gotcha. And then Representative Shelley, I don't see anybody from Manti and from Mount Pleasant in the room, but usually, what? Katie Witt's online, terrific, and hopefully others are. Okay, terrific.
I just want to add, when you hear back on this one, please let us know. We'd like to do a quick vote count. So if you hear back from your rep that they're either a yes or a no, or they don't say anything back to you, just let us know, and that helps us get the votes whipped.
Perfect. Okay. So that is a concerning bill. Now let me give some good news. Okay. Mayor Walker's online, so he's not here in person, but how many remember when Representative Cal Roberts came to the annual convention 3 months ago? Okay. I was hoping for more hands, but it's okay. That's why I have the picture. So to help you remember. For those of you who are new, Representative Cal Roberts was on the stage and spent most of the time with Mayor Walker talking about partnership, particularly around infrastructure funding. Oh, look at this. Speaking of partnership and infrastructure funding, we have Mr. Infrastructure himself. So I'll just finish this bill and then we'll turn it over to the president. When Representative Roberts presented to us at the annual convention, it was all about how can we partner on infrastructure to unlock housing units. And that is House Bill 492. This gives just an idea of where some of the dollars from House Bill 492 may come from, and it's within the Transportation Investment Fund. And I introduced the Senate President as Mr. Infrastructure, and that's because I think there's nobody in the state, or certainly nobody in the Senate who knows infrastructure better than President Adams, and has had his fingers on the pulse of the transportation infrastructure needs of the state. But House Bill 492 would create the State Housing Infrastructure Partnership, or the SHIP. Yes, alphabet soup, but this is all about the partnership. And the idea here is it'd be a revolving loan fund that brings together that partnership of state leaders, local governments that have planned for and entitled units, and builders who are willing to meet certain criteria, bring those together with criteria including number of units, ownership, and affordability. Also would have specific grant dollar available for Salt Lake County specifically. So there'd be money statewide, but also money specifically for Salt Lake County. And then there is infrastructure money specifically for Point of the Mountain therein. And then there's language about state surplus land. So part of our homework assignment now that this bill is out is let us know, are we missing anything in the bill about the functionality of the program? So are we missing anything technically? Okay, this bill is still in rules, but it's going to move soon. So please get feedback to us. But this is kind of the fulfillment of those conversations with Representative Roberts on our stage, and with conversations with the Senate President and the House Speaker and the Governor and others over the last little while around partnering on infrastructure. Justin, do you want to introduce the President real quick? Okay, I'll turn to Justin to introduce the Senate President.
This will be pretty easy. President Adams, come on up. So we're excited to have President Adams here with us. President Adams is the president of the Utah State Senate. I have known President Adams since I was about 14 years old.
So maybe that old.
Maybe that old. I used to sweep out houses that were under constructions for the Adam Company sometimes.
Yeah, we haven't built a home for probably 10 or 15 years, but that was the day when we were building a lot of homes. So
That's right.
A lot of first home buyers.
So President Adams, turn it over to you to talk about whatever you're doing.
In fact, if it weren't for Justin's dad, I wouldn't be here. He basically manages our operation while I'm gone. So a great friend, great people in the state of Utah. You know, I feel comfortable in this room, not only because it's a committee room, but I feel comfortable because maybe you don't know, I served 9 years on the Layton City Council, served 4 years on a planning commission. I know a little bit about city government, a little bit about some of the local things you had, challenges you have locally. There's not a harder job on the planet than being on the city council or planning commission. You're upfront and personal. You got to go home and you deal with your neighbors and friends that live next to you, and you've got to find a way to make the things they care about the land use make work. I learned a new term once when I was working on some infrastructure stuff. Somebody told me about cave people. I didn't know what that was, but Citizens Against Virtually Everything. And we deal with those all the time. And I know that's a tough job for you. So thank you for your service. The other reason I feel really comfortable here, I walked in, I got a group here from Ukraine, and maybe they know, maybe they don't, but we led a 30-member group to Ukraine to maybe 2.5 years ago, maybe that long or more, just after the war started. I never thought in my lifetime that I would see the things I saw when I went to Ukraine. I went to a city called Bucha, and I probably didn't say that right, but in Bucha, they talked to the people there. And when the Russians came into the town, they just shot men, women, and children in the street. I can't imagine that. I talked to the residents. They said they went into their homes. They actually took their furniture out of their homes. Why? I don't know. Threw it in the street. They took their appliances and threw them out. They took their toilets out and threw them out in the street. And I guess maybe to humiliate them, then they dug trenches. And they thought the trenches were to get ready for the Ukrainians coming back to fortify the troops, and they weren't for that. They just scooped the people up and dumped them in the trenches, and stood on one of those trenches. It was unbelievable. They talked about trying to recognize the people as they brought them out. Even with DNA evidence, they couldn't. Horrible, horrible, horrible things happening. And right now, we're in a bubble here. We get to experience the great things we do. We know Utah's the greatest state in the nation, and if you don't believe it, I'll remind everyone, U.S. News and World Report, 3 years ago we were number one, 2 years ago we were number one, last year we're number one, rich states, poor states, 18 years in a row. I mean, we've reached maturity. I think 18 is maturity, isn't it? 18 years in a row, best economic outlook. You got Raj Chetty, who comes from Boston, from Harvard. He comes out and looks at upward mobility, meaning how your grandkids have a better future than you do. Second year in a row, Utah's number one for upward mobility. A lot of that happens, and as Senate President, I want to take credit for it all. I hope you understand, you give it to me. But I know better than that. It's the people of Utah and you that are doing all this great work. So I've got a few things I want to talk about but maybe I'm going to open up for questions first. I'm looking at this group. And if there aren't questions, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that are really important to me. I see so many friends here. Go ahead. Is it Kate? You got a question back there, Kate?
I do. Thank you,
Mayor,
President.
how you doing, Mayor?
I am great. Thank you, Senate President. For those online, Kate Bradshaw for Bountiful. President, we know that there's going to be a transportation bill restructuring UTA as it moves through your body. I know you spent time in your past on the Transportation Commission. So if you have any thoughts to share with us on that bill, but I would also ask you to keep in mind, the robust local engagement that we would request that your body consider as you continue to evolve that bill a little bit, that's important to us, that we maintain those connections so that we can help make sure the right projects land in our communities.
We've had 3 just unbelievable commissioners that have moved UTA, I believe, into the next era. I thank them. I don't see Carlton or Beth, whoever's here, but they've done a humongous job. We're moving now more into an executive director type of a structure with a board. So you're right, Kate. As we structure that board, we'll keep in mind the local, because we know UTA's, it kind of has a feel of a state agency because 90% of the people live along the Wasatch Front, but it still is locally controlled. So we will do that. I would say that, I've been involved in a lot of transportation issues, and I could talk all about TIF and all the things we've done as far as economic stability and the commitment we've made to infrastructure. But the one thing I do know, I love bypasses. I'd like to see, I don't know if anybody's here from Logan. I'd like a Logan bypass. Anybody, I know these people may not like me because I like these things, but I want a bypass in Heber City. I think there ought to be a bypass going down through Eagle Mountain. I think there ought to be a bypass Mountain View in Salt Lake, help fund the Mountain View corridor, I got involved here because of Legacy in Davis County. Now, I like those bypasses because see our communities grow and see how congested we get if we don't have that capacity Street and those extra bypass roads that allow mobility and allow our quality of life. But you know what? We aren't going to build, I don't think we will. Maybe, I don't know if I will. Maybe I've got enough energy. But I don't think we're going to build a road to the lake, the Great Salt Lake in Davis County. And when I look at the point of the mountain, I just don't see another Mountain View and I-15, or we're pretty constricted there. And so what's the future when we hit 6 million? The future is transit. We have to make Front Runner more efficient than the automobile. When I was in Bern, Switzerland, trying to get back to Zurich to catch a flight, I jumped on the train, and when I got on the train, I guess I either lost my ticket or didn't have a seat, but there wasn't much of a spot to sit. And I thought, man, this train is packed. I wonder if I got a car, how I get back to Zurich. I opened up my app, and you know how long it takes to drive from Bern, Switzerland to Zurich? It takes over 2 hours in a car, and they drive 70, 80 miles an hour in Switzerland. So it's a fast car ride, but 2 hours. I was on the train, express train, 1 hour. The thing was packed. And when we can go from Provo to Salt Lake in half the time it takes to drive, we will fill Front Runner. And when we go from Ogden to Salt Lake in half the time, we will fill Front Runner. We aren't a third world country, but we are when it comes to transit. And we aren't doing what we need to do. We need a 150-mile-an-hour train. We need 15-minute intervals, and we need express trains double tracking, and we need to get there. So, anyway, Kate, we're going to push really hard. Transit's a big deal right now. It's something we're really trying to push. So anyway, and I see what's at front. I see everybody shaking their head, but that's the future. And if we don't do it, and quality of life, you can talk all about quality of life. From my house to Snow Basin Ski Resort's 23 minutes, by the way. That's pretty good quality of life. My house to the Capitol, 23 minutes. From my house to the airport is 23 minutes. Turn that into a 2-hour commute, and what happens to your quality of life? One of the things I did when I was in the House before I left, ran the bill that permitted the construction of the first phase of Legacy to Farmington. People that lived in Davis County at that time, some of them were leaving Salt Lake, going up through Parley's, around through Colville, down through Weber Canyon to get home. I had people coming with tears in their eyes when we opened up Legacy, talking about how they could get home for the kids' soccer games. When we lose mobility, we lose that quality of life. And if we don't see what's coming at us, and we don't stay ahead of infrastructure construction, we're going to rue the day, because our quality of life is going to deteriorate. It's not ours, it'll be our kids and grandkids. So we need to keep focused on that. So anyway, thank you, Kate. More questions, sorry. If not, I'm going to talk about something else, okay? So I am going to talk about something that's really a passion for me. Our founding fathers put together, and we celebrate 250 years this year, a celebration of America. And America is the hope of the world. And when I was in Ukraine, everybody's turning to America. When I'm in Israel, everybody's turning to America. Northern Africa, everybody's turning to America. We are the hope of the world. But when our founding fathers put together, we didn't put together a democracy. We put together a republic. And Benjamin Franklin was said right after that, a great document we call the Constitution was signed. They came and asked him what they'd done. He said, we've created a republic if we can keep it. And right now, our republic in Utah is under attack. And let me explain to you that, and if you don't know the difference between a pure democracy and a republic, I'll help you understand it. But, and I have a quote here if I can find it, because I love the quote. I want to make sure it gets right. Our first Chief Justice in the United States, John Marshall, said, the difference between a balanced republic and a democracy is like between order and chaos. Right now, we've got chaos when we're talking about initiatives and those type of things. John Adams said he's never seen a pure democracy that hasn't committed suicide on itself. And I'll explain I'll give you a little example of that. I get to see Senate presidents all over the United States. My good friend, a very good Democrat, very liberal Democrat. He'd make most of the Democrats here look very conservative. Rob Wagner in Oregon. I said, how are things going in Oregon? He said, they're going horrible. I said, why? He says, because we're the petri dish of America. I said, what's a petri? I mean, is it that bad? He said, every crazy initiative that wants to be passed in America goes to Oregon. I said, come on, Oregon's beautiful. Portland, the coast, it's a great state. He said, no, ballot measure 110. I mean, crap, I can't keep track of the bills here. Anybody know what ballot measure 110 in Oregon is? I thought, so I looked it up, Google it, and I want you to Google it here. Those that we aren't banning cell phones in this room. We may in school, but you can pull up your phones and look at it. But ballot measure 110, you'll find what it does is it changes heroin, LSD, Oxycontin, every hard drug you want to talk about, makes them a Class E infraction. Well, look what a Class E infraction is in Oregon. A Class E infraction is a $25 minimum, $100 maximum fine, waived with counseling, basically legalized heroin. And those of you that are planners, and maybe there's some in the room, maybe not, but when I was on the city council, we held up Portland as the iconic city of the entire United States. Everybody wanted to be like Portland. I went to Portland, looked at what there. I went on trips with UTA there, looked at their streetcars. Portland was it. Go to Portland right now. What is it? It is a mess. The iconic building in Portland in the Wall Street Journal last summer was in foreclosure, 30 cents on the dollar. Why? If we don't understand the difference between a republic and a democracy, we're in trouble because the initiative process will destroy America. And I will tell you that I could pass an initiative right now, probably, if I got enough money, go get the signatures. We're in the middle of it right now. And I'm not talking about Proposition 4. Proposition 4 has nothing to do with our form of government. Proposition 4 is is an outcome of that form. But when our Supreme Court ruled, and I'll go maybe give you more detail. I won't go there yet. No, maybe I will. I'm going to try to explain the difference. When Arizona applied for statehood, they had an initiative process in their enabling documents. They were denied statehood. Why? Because the guarantee clause in the Constitution. And I'm going to read you the guarantee clause in the Constitution. It's Article 4, Section 4. It says the United States shall guarantee every state a Republican form of government. Benjamin Franklin's and John Adams's and our founding fathers forming a republic. So they denied Arizona statehood because they had an initiative in their Constitution. We put ours in the 1900s, along with 20 other states. There's about 30 states that don't even allow initiatives. When it was put in place, we gave equal power. So initiatives and statute had the same power. And then and there were 3 Supreme Court cases that actually have confirmed that equal power. And then 18 months ago, our Supreme Court ruled that no, hold on, initiatives have a superior power. Now, Oregon's trying to change ballot measure 110 right now because they can. In Utah, we would not have the ability to change ballot measure 110. We passed a marijuana and an initiative, I think 3 or 4 years ago. I asked the people how many times we've changed that marijuana initiative. They think hundreds. There's 2 or 3 bills on it on changing that marijuana initiative right now. When our Supreme Court ruled that if an initiative alters a reform government, the legislature is under a strict scrutiny doctrine, they have moved us from a republic to a democracy. And if you want to see all the things I just talked about being number one, you're going to see that wash away. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues I deal with up here. There's none that's more important than giving a constitutional amendment, helping our Supreme Court rule right as to whether we're a republic or a democracy. If you want to know how I feel about it, I'll tell you a little later. But if you can't tell, I think it's the number one issue here. So I'm going to probably run out of time. But anyway, so any more questions or anything else? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you again.
All right. Thank you, President Adams. Do appreciate you taking the time to come speak with us and answer questions today. I think we are back to our slides. No, thank you, Mariah. Jared, you're back here. Welcome. You're here. We're going to jump right to the legal stuff. We skipped it without you. So we're going to turn the time for a minute here to Jared. Now, yes, we are over time. That being said, we don't have to clear the room today as quickly as we have in previous weeks. You still do need to clean up your trash, though. So if you want to hang with us for a couple more minutes, we have a few more things to cover. If you need to go, though, we understand. We will not judge you if you need to leave, though. But Jared, take over 211.
Do you have anything? No? Okay. This one is pretty easy. Reach out to your senators today. If you remember, this is the tort reform bill with Senator Colmore, and that talks about the collateral source rule and a a recent Supreme Court case that essentially ruled that that you can't collect, that plaintiffs who are injured cannot collect past medical bills that do not, after the difference between the hospital bill and the insurance discounted rate. So we ask you to reach out to your senators today. Keep an eye out for an action alert. And this is one that we still oppose and have not, there's been no movement on it other than sitting where it's been. So anything else on that?
The only thing I'll add, if you are not sure what the bill does, talk to your city attorney and see where they're at on this one. They could give you some thoughts and feelings and advice. And then with that, back to housing and land use.
All right, folks, we're going to go rapid fire to make sure we at least have these on your radar before we do the staff ratification or the ratification of the staff recommendations. House Bill 477 came out at the end of last week. This is the land use task force bill that we've been working on for the last few months. It is not yet complete. So she wanted to get it moving, get it numbered, get it in the system. There's still some details that need to come into it. There are a couple of key pieces to it. Number one, there's language about impermissible bias for planning commissions. This actually gets to the administrative function versus the legislative function versus the quasi-judicial function of a planning commission. And when they're acting administratively, they cannot act with impermissible bias. That is a term of art from state case law going back to the 90s of how an administrative action should work. And if an applicant comes before an administrative body, there should be a perception of fairness before the administrative body. So when we surveyed this concept, 85% of our advisory subgroup was comfortable with having this in the Planning Commission code. So that's why it's in House Bill 477. There was litigation. The Supreme Court ruled about the incorporation process with West Hills. This second provision in the bill cleans up some of the ambiguities that came out of that court case. Also cleans up some from last year's bill, House Bill 368 and SB 179. House Bill 477 also has detached ADUs in it. As a reminder, when we met all the way back in the summertime, we talked about whether or not to go forward with a proactive approach on detached ADUs. Again, the language that's in the bill right now doesn't quite reflect everything that we had agreed on. It's the first draft of it. We're working on some red lines. But you told us earlier this session, 78% medium to high priority on the 10,000 square foot lot size. That was always our proposal. It's not in the bill right now, but she's agreed to put that back in the bill. So in a nutshell, this bill follows what we've referred to as option D, which when we surveyed you on option D during the interim, people were somewhat to very comfortable with option D. Cities of a certain size have to pass an ordinance that allows detached ADUs on lots of 10,000 square feet or more subject to sufficient infrastructure. And then a lot of the details are left to the locals of what that looks like. Right now, it's missing the 10,000 square foot size, and we're working on clarifications, particularly around the infrastructure sufficiency, because that was a key point in our deliberations through the off season. So position pending as we're working on those red lines, but just wanted to make sure everyone was aware. And then President Adams is actually running a joint resolution about the land use task force because it's been 20 years of dialogue that I think has been, has actually served the state well. When I talk to counterparts in other states, they don't have the same level of collaboration and the willingness to have difficult conversations like we do here. So President Adams wanted to recognize that as there's been now 20 years of this type of proactive collaboration. The other thing that he's running, the only other bill that he is running is what he just referenced during his impassioned speech here a moment ago. There will be a bill, it'll come out soon, around the role of initiatives and legislative authority. The reason he wanted to bring it up to this body is because the legislative authority, as it applies to the state legislature in the Constitution, also applies to our city councils. So once that comes out, we will do a briefing explaining what that bill and a potential constitutional amendment will mean. We did a briefing about this last year when they tried to put it on the constitutional amendment on the ballot, and then ultimately the courts pulled it off. But we'll bring that back to you in more detail once we have a bill. But just so you know, that the second half of his presentation is setting up a bill that he'll be running that will have impacts on cities. Okay, so stay tuned. Okay, House Bill 241. We have a possibility here of collaboration. Representative Perucci is willing to consider changing that definition of eligible entity to include all cities, also clarifying some leasing provisions. My understanding now is that the school districts, generally speaking, are okay with this direction if it gets substituted in this way. As a reminder, under current law, eligible entity gets 90-day first right if a school district property were to go up for sale. And she's going to clarify it doesn't apply to leasing. Right now, only 34 cities meet that definition. Under the bill, a charter school and all cities would have a joint first right. And so it would be a win for communities that currently don't qualify for that definition. For the cities that currently do qualify for the definition, they'd have joint right with the charter school. So our recommendation, based on all the feedback we've received from folks, we've had quite a few current eligible entities that have contacted us saying they're okay with this language. Our recommendation is if the substitute comes out with this framework, that we'd recommend changing to support. Are there any comments about where we're at on this bill? Mike, let's go to.
Hey, Cam. So Mayor Zoltansky, Sandy City. Sandy is one of the cities that's currently eligible for this first option to purchase from school districts based on our size and density. And while nobody likes sharing that first option, I think it is important for us to remember it's land that is designated and acquired for a public purpose, education, and keeping it in the public realm is really important to all of us, including cities like Sandy that enjoy this. And the opportunity to expand it among all cities is really important to expand that use for public good, especially in cities where land scarcity is a growing concern. So for that reason, Sandy's supporting this.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. And one thing I'll just add, Sandy City is actually living this experience right now with a potential surplus site and working with your school district. And so excellent comment. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Winder.
Mike Winder, Mill Creek. Just quick question for you, Cam. Does it stipulate how the district would choose between if both of them were to bid, and what does that look like? And then my other question is, does it say anything about leasing if a district were to do a long-term lease with an entity?
Yeah, so I'll do the second one first. One of the things she's considering is to clarify that the bill would only apply to disposition or sale of land, not to the long-term lease. That was one thing that's come up a lot in the feedback we've received. The second piece on the process, the school district, the state is actually not putting its thumb on the scale to the school district of which of two competing bids. So if you had a charter school and Mill Creek City, both approaching Granite School District, for example, the state law would list criteria, and the criteria includes community benefit. It also includes educational purposes and other things, but they're not putting the thumb on the scale between the two. So the school district could look at that, look at the city bid, look at the charter school bid, and then make a decision. And the expectation has been that if cities and school districts have a meaningful relationship, the school district's likely going to go the route of the city if they have that relationship. Okay, we'll keep going. House Bill 436 was in committee last week. We're still recommending, we were position pending last week. It was in committee. I want to actually thank Representative Dunnigan and Representative Karen Peterson, because they asked very thoughtful questions about just how MIHP fits for everybody. So even though it was Friday at 6 p.m., it was a really good dialogue. We are working on some potential amendments with Representative Grecius around priority consideration, but also about potentially just doing a pause in MIHP reporting for this year because of the state reorg. So we're working on those pieces that will likely be amended, and we're working towards support if we are able to get those amendments. SB 219, the billboard bill, I mentioned this earlier. Our counter proposal is to require UDOT to notify the city of timing. We're opposed as drafted, but every city that's responded to me has said they're comfortable with this counter proposal. So we're just waiting to hear back from industry. I presented it to industry on Thursday and waiting to hear back from them there. The impact fee bill, we've heard a lot of concerns. This should have said position pending. If this bill concerns you, let us know. On Friday, we heard from a bunch of cities that had concerns about this bill. There will be an impact fee audit this year that the Legislative Auditor's Office is doing. It won't happen during the session, it'll happen in the interim, but just be prepared for that in the impact fee space. And then Jared, do you want to quickly do this one? And then you still need to do elections, right? Okay. So yeah, this one, and then I'm done, I think. I just went as fast as I could. So you had this one, then elections. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. So this one is HB 470, Building Inspection Amendments. It does two things. The first thing is it relates to plan review. Now at the top, you'll see the bullet. This only applies to what is called an alteration of an owner-occupied single-family unit. But there's no definition of what an alteration is. So there are some tweaks that will be needed if we move forward with this, and there will be edits that need to be made. So this affects two things. One is the plan review side, and it says the municipality has to accept a plan review if the application is complete, and so long as there's a statement by someone who is a licensed combination inspector. That does not have to be a municipality's building inspector. That can be any third party, anybody that has been licensed as a building inspector and has a combination inspector license. They have to provide a statement within the application that says these plans meet state and local laws, and there's no liability on the municipality as it pertains to the documents and the plans that we've approved. So that's where we're at on the plan review. This still does allow municipalities to conduct inspections during the construction. And the building permit applicant can use third parties from the, if you remember last year, there was a third-party inspection list that each city had to have. What this allows them to do is just go straight to that list. Instead of coming first to the municipality, they can go straight to the list that the municipality has provided and say, we want to use them for our inspection and get that inspection done. So those are really the two things that where this will affect both plan review and inspections. We have yet to talk to Representative Ward on this, and if we do, there will be suggested and proposed amendments. Yes.
I'm not sure what this bill's trying to do, because I'm very confused by it, because of past bills we have, jurisdictions have to have those reviews done within a quick amount of time. And even if you do get that in, you're still going to have to review it to make sure they provided everything. And as of last year, with all the documentation we got, 90.9% of all inspections are done within 24 hours. So this bill just feels like they're trying to hide something. It just doesn't feel right.
So the first thing I'm going to say is don't shoot the messenger, okay?
Okay.
The second thing I'll say is the reason that this is coming out is because of the suggestion that cities are gaming the scheduling and the statistics in a way that allows them to say that they've done the inspections within 3 days, when in fact they've scheduled out the system that they use in scheduling the inspections only allow, say, a week in advance. So you're really getting that inspection more than 3 days. So from the time that they're actually able to schedule that appointment, then the 3 days starts. And so the city reports, well, yeah, we've done the inspection within 3 days, even though their system didn't allow them to schedule, say, the next day or the next day or the next day, if that makes sense.
I think when cities were asked for that information, it was very clear that they said, are you providing inspections within 24 hours of when requested, which everybody took the next day. And I believe it came back that 99.9% of every city in the state was providing that. So I really don't know where this bill's coming from. This just seems like another bad bill that they're trying to push through. And I would love to see us move to oppose on something like this.
I think so. Oh, right here. Kate,
Here.
I
Yeah, we'll throw
mean,
this slide away. We're
President,
talking.
Not to bias you all now that the Slido poll is up, but since this is our representative that is running it in Bountiful, we have reached out, had some discussions about this. I have a couple different frustrations to share with the group on this. One, this is not a story that involves our city, but a neighboring city. And when we asked him to please verify the facts, the anecdotal story facts, because we all know that we all get accused of various being bad cities, and asked him to please check the facts, there was a resistance to doing that. So I have a frustration there. The second is the league staff quickly provided the stats that Mike is referring to on building inspections, and that have been agreed upon stats with the legislative auditor general. And we were basically told in correspondence, I don't believe the statistics that the legislative auditor general has also accepted and verified. So a high degree of frustration that to me, a bad story with unchecked facts, and then a choice made to ignore other good data that has been provided has been made and led to this bill. So with that, enjoy your Slido.
My name's Craig Smith. I work with a lot of cities. Has there been any thought of going on the offensive on this issue? We already have a uniform house, we don't even follow the building code for houses, by the way. We have a lesser code in Utah than the uniform, or I should say the International Building Code. It's International Residential Code, which has lesser standards. And, every session, all we see is bills to undermine building inspections, which is a public safety issue. That's why we have building inspections. Is there any idea about trying to find out, I'm sure there's been people that's been injured or houses that have fallen apart, but trying to do that. Or maybe we should just go to the state and say, if you're so smart at it, why don't you just do it yourselves and you do all the building inspections in the country, in the state? It's like we're just watering down every year the safety of the public. And just like when houses slide off a hill, where people are going to come when they have a problem with their building. And I've got cities that I'm representing that have people who have spent thousands of hours going after the city on building code issues.
if you only knew how many meetings I've been in.
And the other thing, I mean, Kate pointed this out, Mayor President Bradshaw pointed this out, that yeah, the legislative auditor took our data on this one. We've shared the data. It's an accepted fact up here. The Office of Professional Licensure Review also took our data on this one. So we've put it out there. I'll just remind people, a bill coming up every year doesn't mean a bill passes every year, because they usually don't. So we beat this one repeatedly, and we'll keep fighting that. All right, let's talk about elections. And for everyone that's still here, bless you. Again, will not be offended if you lead. Two bills here that we need one that we need feedback on, and one that I just want to put on your radar for now. HB 391, vacancy replacement amendments. There is a lot of pieces in this bill dealing with a lot of elected offices. There's only one piece that I need you to worry about. One, this prohibits filling vacancies between election day and when the new officers are sworn in. So during that period from election day until the new officers are sworn in, you don't fill vacancies. So if someone resigns during that time period, we don't fill that vacancy. For whatever reason, until the new officers come in, the vacancy would not be filled. We'd wait for the new officers to do that. 30-day clock would start ticking when everybody is inaugurated and sworn in. My question is on this, do we care? Because I honestly don't know. So how do you feel about the restrictions on filling vacancies between election day and the new year? Are you comfortable with that? Are you concerned about that? Somewhere in between. So Mike, I think, well, someone want to answer what problem they think it's solving? Because I saw some hands go up when that was asked.
Paul Bins, Lehigh City. I know we had this across the north part of the county. I think 5 of us collectively replaced people because of this. I believe all 5 of us did it a different way. And so there has to be some lines drawn to make sure it's done properly moving forward.
So yeah, this year in particular, there were a lot of vacancies filled during this time period, which created some consternation.
Michelle Stallings, Lehigh City. If you've been through it, you know it matters. Having an outgoing council appoint somebody is problematic. I'll just say that.
So yeah, I'm just going to leave this up for a second while this is out there. This was up in committee and passed out on Friday. The bill dropped very quickly and we didn't have time to get feedback on this one last week, so I want to get some feedback this week. I'll leave that Slido up there for 1 second and I'll start talking about the next bill. Representative Burton has a bill out on elections. We have
Hey,
a question
Justin.
back here. Yeah.
Chris Carnes, Saratoga Springs. We just went through this as well. We waited for the new council, but I do feel that existing councils are voted in and elected to serve a period of time, and they are still the legislative body, and they should have some leeway to legislate until they're done.
Yeah, and that's why we're asking the question, because I know people have thoughts on both sides of this one. All right. I still see numbers going up, so we're going to leave this here for a second. Does it shut it down if I move off the slide, Carson? It does?
Hey,
Yeah.
Justin,
Mhm.
does this bill, sorry, Emma Wilson, Saratoga Springs, again, just did this on my second day in office. Does the 30-day period start when the new council's sworn in? So would we have had to have a vacancy for 30 days? Because that seems less than ideal.
You would, yes, you would have had to have a vacancy for
Okay.
more than 30 days if this was the law. So right now, for anyone who's not aware, once a vacancy is in place, the 30-day clock starts ticking. There is an additional clock there that if you don't fill it, then the lieutenant governor reaches out to you and says, no, you really need to fill this. And you technically have 30 more days without anything bad really happening. But this would just say the 30-day clock doesn't start ticking till the new council comes in.
Justin,
Yep.
Tom from Mill Creek. We had an interesting situation where we had 2 seats have to be filled after the election. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this right now. I'm somewhat concerned, but I'd appreciate it if we could have some sort of, maybe even carve out for cities who re-elect their elected officials, because we had to go replace a mayor and a city council member, and we would have been mayorless and city council member, well, mayorless for several months if this were the case.
And yeah, I haven't delved, and I'm not asking that because I can think of 15 different scenarios about what could happen depending on who, what, where, and why. So if this moves forward, I think there should be some discussion around, what that looks like. Because there are different reasons someone might resign. And if someone, say, passed away tragically, I don't know that there's a reason to wait on that. But yeah, discussion should be had there. Yeah.
We had the situation in Clinton. What we talked, maybe a good solution would be that appointment, if it's an election year, lasts until December 31, and then the new council can reappoint or.
So you appoint someone for like 30 days?
Yeah.
Potentially. Okay, well, we'll look at the Slido feedback. Appreciate everyone on this. This next one, I just want to make you aware of it. HB 479, election code modifications. This from Representative Burton. There's a lot of things in this, but it would require that all ballot drop boxes be attended by 2 poll workers. You would be paying for it. They don't have like an extra poll worker fund for this one. So yes, I mean, that was the reaction I was expecting. It would basically, drop boxes now work like polling locations. You would show voter ID, you would have to have it staffed. You could not drop off a ballot at the drop box unless the 2 people were there. If a municipality has less than 10,000 active voters, you need 1 drop box. If you have more than 10,000 active voters, you need 2 drop boxes plus an extra drop box for every 10,000 people above that. I don't know why they want to do this. This is the same thing they wanted to do last year. There are people who hate vote by mail, and they're trying to make vote by mail work more like not vote by mail. That's the reason, really, because I'm losing a filter later in the session. That's what's going on. So yes, there are potential costs on this one. There are a lot of people pushing on this. That's why we're positioned pending right now, because I don't know if this is the sub that we'll ultimately see in committee. But I'm seeing concerns with this from the crowd. And that's what I wanted to check on. So we have probably had a record number of bills on our agenda today, 35, which is a lot. Here's the takeaway on TIF. I'm going to, if I can get this. If you want to talk about all the different tax increment bills, reach out to Carson. Carson's email is right there. If you watch the wrap-up video tonight, we will cover TIF a little bit in that video, just because it is 2:00 and we're going to wrap this up here. But we will have more discussions around TIF, but there are a lot of discussions going in that area. We have as many acronyms as we could fit on a slide in this one. So one, watch the nightly video tonight. We'll do a little bit more discussion around TIF. Carson will download all his knowledge to you. And then if you would like to talk more about TIF, please let Carson know. And with that, council member, we're ready to wrap this thing up. Oh my gosh, so many things we jumped, but that's okay.
Okay, I'll look for a motion to ratify our bill tracker. Are you making a motion? Modify as presented. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? I need another motion to adjourn. And seconds, sounds like a lot. All in favor, say aye. Thank you.